Imagine waking up one morning in a nation that's tearing itself apart. Brother against brother. States against states. Cities burning. Families divided. And then, with a single signature on a single piece of paper, everything changes not instantly, not peacefully, but forever. The year is 1863, and two moments collide in American history so powerfully that they don't just decide a war, they redefine what the war is even about. One happens in ink. The other happens in blood. The Emancipation Proclamation and the Battle of Gettysburg. Together, they become the moral and military turning points of the American Civil War, and once you truly understand why, you'll never see this conflict the same way again. By the start of 1863, the Civil War had already been raging for nearly 2 years, and to many people, it felt endless. Tens of thousands were dead. Towns were destroyed. Soldiers were exhausted. And President Abraham Lincoln was under crushing pressure from every direction imaginable. The Union had not collapsed, but it hadn't delivered a decisive blow either. Worse still, the original reason for fighting felt painfully unclear to ordinary Americans. Was this war really about saving the Union? Or was it about ending slavery? Or was it becoming something else entirely, a meat grinder that consumed lives without purpose? Lincoln understood something crucial that many politicians avoided admitting. Wars are not won by weapons alone. They are won by belief, by meaning, by convincing people that the suffering has a reason. And by the end of 1862, Lincoln knew that. On January 1, 1863, Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. On the surface, it sounds simple. It declared that enslaved people in states rebelling against the Union were now free. But in reality, this document was explosive. It didn't immediately free every enslaved person. It didn't apply to border states loyal to the Union. And it certainly didn't end slavery overnight. Critics then, and even now, have argued that it was limited, strategic, even cynical. But here's the deeper truth. The Emancipation Proclamation fundamentally transformed the Civil War. Before 1863, the Union could plausibly claim it was fighting only to preserve the nation. After the proclamation, that claim was gone forever. The war was now openly, unmistakably linked to the destruction of slavery. And that changed everything. For enslaved people across the South, the proclamation wasn't just words on paper. It was a signal, a promise, a crack of light in generations of darkness. Wherever Union armies advanced, enslaved men, women, and children fled plantations and farms, seeking freedom behind blue lines. They forced the issue forward with their own courage, turning Lincoln's words into reality step by step. At the same time, the proclamation sent shockwaves far beyond American borders. Britain and France had been watching the Civil War closely, weighing whether to recognize or even support the Confederacy. But morality alone doesn't win wars. And while the Emancipation Proclamation redefined the meaning of the conflict, the Union still needed a military turning point, one powerful enough to stop the Confederate momentum and prove that victory was possible. That turning point came in the summer heat of Pennsylvania. In early July of 1863, Confederate General Robert E. Lee made a daring gamble. After a stunning victory at Chancellorsville, Lee believed his army was invincible. He marched north, into Union territory, hoping to deliver a crushing blow that might force the North to negotiate peace. His target wasn't a city at first, it was opportunity. And that opportunity found him in a small crossroads town called Gettysburg. What followed over 3 brutal days was the bloodiest battle ever fought on American soil. Nearly 50,000 men were killed, wounded, or missing. Fields turned into graveyards. Churches became hospitals. The air filled with smoke, screams, and the sound of constant gunfire. Soldiers fought hand to hand. Commanders made decisions that would haunt history forever. On the first day, Confederate forces pushed Union troops through the town. It looked like another Southern victory was unfolding. But the Union Army regrouped on high ground just south of Gettysburg Cemetery Ridge, Little Round Top, and Cemetery Hill. Geography now mattered more than confidence. And for the first time, Lee was facing an enemy willing and able to hold firm. The second day saw some of the most desperate fighting of the war. At Little Round Top, Union soldiers ran out of ammunition and charged downhill with bayonets to hold the line. At places like the wheat field and the peach orchard, control changed hands again and again, with bodies piling up in horrific numbers. The Union bent, but it did not break. Then came the third day. And with it, one of the most infamous moments in military history, Pickett's charge. Lee ordered nearly 12,500 Confederate soldiers to march across open ground toward the center of the Union line. It was a gamble born of belief and desperation. Cannons roared. Rifles cracked. Men fell by the hundreds. And when the survivors reached the Union defenses, they were overwhelmed. The charge failed. Completely. And in that moment, the Confederate invasion of the North collapsed. Lee was forced to retreat back into Virginia, never again mounting a serious offensive on Union soil. Gettysburg was not the end of the war, but it was the end of Confederate hope for victory. Here's where the story becomes truly powerful. Gettysburg happened just months after the Emancipation Proclamation. One gave the war a moral purpose. The other proved that purpose could be defended with force. Together, they reshaped the conflict in ways that neither could have achieved alone. After Gettysburg, the Confederacy was on the defensive. The Gettysburg Address didn't mention specific battles or generals. It didn't celebrate victory. Instead, it reframed the war as a test of human equality itself. Lincoln spoke of a new birth of freedom, directly tying the sacrifice of soldiers to the promise of emancipation. In doing so, he sealed 1863 as the year the Civil War found its soul. From that point on, black soldiers joined the Union Army in massive numbers, fighting not just for the nation, but for their own freedom. The Union war effort gained manpower, momentum, and moral clarity. The Confederacy, meanwhile, faced dwindling resources, growing casualties, and a cause that was increasingly impossible to defend both at home and abroad. The war would continue for nearly 2 more years. More blood would be spilled. More families would grieve. But the outcome was no longer a mystery. The road to Appomattox began in 1863 with a pen in Lincoln's hand and a shattered Confederate charge on a Pennsylvania hillside. So when we talk about turning points, we're not just talking about dates and documents or tactics and terrain. We're talking about moments when history changes direction, when a nation looks into the mirror of its own values and decides whether it will live up to them. In 1863, America made that decision painfully, imperfectly, and at an enormous cost, but it made it nonetheless. And that's why the Emancipation Proclamation and Gettysburg are inseparable. One gave the war meaning. The other gave it momentum. Together, they ensured that the Civil War would not